Welcome to the Softland Central podcast, your home for market entry knowledge and resources. Softland Central is brought to you by Softland Partners, an online marketplace to help you find best fit resources for your market entry. Find them at softlandpartners.com. Hi, and welcome to Softland Central, the hub of market entry knowledge and information. So it's a real great day here. We've got some folks from the Metro Atlanta Chamber. We have John and Michael who are here to talk to us a little bit about both what's going on at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. They are totally focused on working with internationalizing companies. So either companies that are offshore coming into Atlanta and Georgia, or companies that are going out, and so they've got a lot of great activities going on. Welcome, John and Michael.
Thank you, Bill. Good to see you. We're glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, John, do you want to kick off and just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Metro Atlanta Chamber and your activities?
Well, sure. It's great to be here again. See you, Bill, and appreciate you having our team on, our global commerce team. Michael, my colleague here. I'm John Woodward. I'm Vice President of Global Commerce at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. The Metro Atlanta Chamber is actually one of the oldest chambers of commerce in the U.S., over 160 years old, started before the U.S. Civil War. It is the Chamber of Commerce for the Metropolitan Atlanta region, which is 29 counties, about 23,000 square kilometers, and 6 million plus inhabitants. Our team, we are the international division or international team within the Economic Development Division, which has three groups here. Our group, the project management team, which of course manages the projects, as the name would imply, and our ecosystem specialist team, on which we have specialist staff experts in certain ecosystems that are objectively strong here in Metro Atlanta, and so their job is to dive into those ecosystems. For Michael and me, we're more the generalist. Our specialty comes whenever it's cross-border, and as you mentioned in your opening, cross-border, of course, is a two-way street, which is a critical understanding of that. So it could be inbound, FDI, foreign direct investment. It could be outbound, that is working with our companies in this 29 county region that are considering expanding overseas or investing overseas.
Fantastic. And John, your role specifically, do you want to just share, what you're particularly focused on?
Well, my role, I kind of do a little bit of both, dabble in both. I started off on the inbound side, the FDI side. I was director of foreign investment for and VP of the team. And actually my background is in economic development. I've been here for almost 15 years. But before that, I was director of economic development in the city of Richmond, Virginia, heading up the agency there. And actually prior to that, though, I was in the private sector side in commercial real estate with Cushman & Wakefield in New York. And even going back further, I was in foreign exchange and FX trader. That was a while back. That was before the euro. So we were doing pesetas and Dutch guilders and French francs, a little more interesting. But the point is, there's that whole international aspect to it throughout. So my role is working with our economic development team, both here in the chamber and with our partners, which is a critical element to mention. So again, we are the regional chamber for the metropolitan area of Atlanta. But of course, within that area, there are many local governments, many local EDOs, economic development organizations, all of whom we work with. And we also work with the state of Georgia economic development shop, which has a lot of great professionals there. And so we all work together as a team, both internally and with them. And the idea is to present a seamless team, a seamless organization for any sort of prospect that might be there. They don't have to shift through. So that's a lot of what I do there, and I'll let Michael go on his side.
Yeah, no, that's great. Michael, do you want to share a little bit about your specific focus?
Yeah, absolutely. As John mentioned, I'm on his team with the global commerce team, and I'm the director for global business development. So I work also on the in and outbound side, but historically, when I actually started at the chamber, I was more focused on the trade side, and I'm still covering a lot of that. So helping companies in this whole process of internationalization when it comes to exports. And as John mentioned, we do that in collaboration with all of our partners at the state level, regional level, the federal government with the U.S. Commercial Service here. So yeah, that's kind of the focus. I also work on FDI, but kind of split it up a little bit, and yeah, excited to be here.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's cool. And I have to say, just we've gotten to know each other over the last year or a couple of years, and I just so enjoy the way that you all work in the partnering attitude that you have. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of the companies that you've worked with, and just the stories they tell about your work and your service, and just the connections you can help them make. It's really inspiring. So a hat tip to you and all your great work.
That.
Yeah. So I know you're bi-directional, and so maybe we could hop into the attraction and FDI side first, and talk a little bit about what you do there. So we're in that case, we're talking about companies interested in coming into Atlanta and into Georgia. What are some of the things that you would help a company do in that regard?
Well, I'll jump in, and where I miss, Michael can chime in as well. But you mentioned a lot of it there, Bill. Is the connections when companies are coming in, especially it's of an SME, a small medium enterprise, Mittelstand in German, PME in French. But if it's a small medium enterprise, they don't have those connections. They don't have those. A big multinational, of course, will have a larger network. But those SMEs oftentimes do not. And so a fundamental aspect of any economic development organization is to facilitate those connections that are valuable, not superfluous, but ones that actually move a project or move an objective forward. I think it's important to note on a basic level that when companies are coming in, again, I'm talking really about the SMEs. Or some multinationals, but when companies are coming into the U.S. market, which is still the largest consumer market in the world, it's still an attractive market, but it can be very scary for those coming in. It's a huge. The United States is many times over larger than most all countries you deal with, and when they're coming in, they're usually coming in for one of two reasons. They either already have a client or a customer base that's here in the U.S. They're already servicing from their home country and have been doing so. But to grow that business, or even to continue that business, that customer base or that client here is saying, well, you need a presence here in the U.S. to maintain this business relationship and to continue this or to grow this. So in that case, it's being driven by business already in place, and they're looking to solidify it and expand it. The other one of the two, the other main reason, that the principal reason that a company would come into the U.S. is simply they've built a better mousetrap. They've as we say, they've got something that is better than what's out there now, or they think it's better than what's out there now. And as I mentioned, it's still the world's largest consumer market, a large economy, going back and forth with China, but it's still a tremendous place to enter. And if you have that better mousetrap, or you think you have that better mousetrap, the potential for coming into the U.S. is enormous. So one of those two things are what's driving U.S. market entry in almost all the cases of companies coming in. However, both of those have different approaches to coming in. In the former category, if you already have that customer base or that client base, you've already got some sort of foundation for entering the U.S. market. You've got some sort of path, some sort of deliverables, or certainly parameters that are going to guide your U.S. market entry process and where you locate. On the second one, the latter one, the better mousetrap one, that's a matter of, well, where can I do the best with my better mousetrap? And that's where the economics play in, the various variables, the indicators, what will be most beneficial to that company coming on in. And of course, those are what economic developers love to work with, because our profession loves to market our respective regions and speak the benefits of those. So those are the two primary categories of companies coming in for U.S. market entry. And then in our case, as I mentioned, we will work on the connections. We are of the opinion that there's a fundamentally sound business case for Metro Atlanta, and I won't go into all of that now, but we will present that business case. Again, we bring in those partners I mentioned, not just on the local and the state level, but the academic partners. Atlanta has a tremendous university system, some 300,000 college students every year, and on a business level. And that's a significant thing that our particular shop, Michael's and my shop, can bring into the equation. Being the Metro Atlanta Chamber, unlike a lot of EDOs, economic development organizations in the US, they're often structured as public-private partnerships. If they're not a direct government agency, state agency or local agency, then if it's a regional marketing group, which we are effectively, they're often structured as public-private partnerships. The Metro Atlanta Chamber is unique in that we are entirely private by choice. So we are effectively the business voice of the Metro region, again, been around since 1859. And so because of that, our board of directors, our chairperson, are all the top echelons of the major companies in this region. And there are some major multinational companies based here. And so we can bring in that specifically private sector focus and those connections, which are so important. When a company's coming in, they're looking to do business. And so those business connections are critical. That's a lot of what our department, our division brings to the equation. And I mentioned earlier, the ecosystem specialists, their job really is to dive down into those ecosystems, those sectors that are strong in Metro Atlanta. So it could be advanced manufacturing, could be logistics, supply chain. Fintech is a big sector here. Smart cities is a growing sector here. Med tech, health IT. So we have folks on staff whose job is to really know those verticals. And so again, Michael and I are the generalists. We're the cross-border ones. But if it is a company in, say, health IT, we would go to our health IT person to help with that ecosystem connections and getting into that ecosystem, learning about that here. And of course, that cross-border element, which goes across any of those categories. I mean, a company coming in needs to do certain things entering the US market. That's where Michael and I come in, helping with that. But having that business connection is critical, and it complements with an E, what the government side brings in. I mean, we at the Metro Atlanta Chamber are not handing out incentives. We don't hold the purse strings on incentives. Those are local government and state government issues. But we work hand in glove with the state governments and the local governments, bringing in that business perspective, and when needed, bringing in that academic perspective, the universities or the technical colleges. So it's really a matter, you really hit the nail on the head, Bill, with your word connections. That's a critical element of what we do. You want to be a resource for those companies coming into the US that otherwise just, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the resources, looking for that information, looking for that way to help them with this very large process so that they can focus on that better mousetrap that they're trying to bring into the market.
Yeah, I'm almost in my head envisioning whether it's a concierge or a quarterback, but you're sort of acting as the central point of contact to resource all of the various specialists within the ecosystem. Is that?
And it depends entirely. There's some people say, well, what's the uniform, what's a set thing to be done? There is no set thing, frankly. Some are very independent. Some are going through, they need just minimal help or connections or anything like that. Others really need to have their hand held all the way through the process. And so, an important part of this line of work is knowing exactly how to gauge that level of assistance. But right. I mean, we have, for example, an in-house research team here at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and Michael and I use them a lot because, again, international companies coming in, they don't know the U.S. market as well as a domestic company would. And so providing that research, providing that data that's relevant for that company can be very helpful. Some of them, that might be all they need. They just need how many I don't know how many widget makers are in this particular area or something like that, or what's the wage rate of this, or some sort of economic data. And that might be all they need. Others would actually, utilize our project management team, helping to find locations, or helping to find employer interviews or things like that. Others still may indeed engage the ecosystem side for that deep dive into that sector that's for them, and with those connections there. So it really varies. It runs the gamut of some need a lot, some don't need that much at all. But the bottom line is any EDO wants to be a resource for those companies as they're going through this process, again, so they can focus on their business at hand.
That makes sense. So Michael, maybe you could just take a minute, and then John gave a little snapshot to some of the industries that are most prevalent or dense and strong in the Atlanta region. And he talked about advanced manufacturing and logistics. There was some mention of healthcare, but what are sort of the big verticals in the region?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that part. And as John mentioned, we have experts and staff for some of those sectors. And of course, the state has as well, and they work closely together on growing those industry sectors. John mentioned a fair amount of them already. And I mean, one big, of course, is manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, logistics. I mean, Atlanta is essentially a logistic hub and has always been. So it's still one of our big economic sectors or industry sectors. But of course, there are a lot of new technology sectors, including fintech. Of course, cybersecurity is a big one, and the creative industries, especially in the areas of esports and film production. I think that's something that resonates really often, really well with foreign companies that are coming over here, and because people are aware of a lot of the productions that came out of Atlanta over the last decade. And then, of course, the smart city component, we actually have someone on staff who is focusing on smart cities and IoT and that whole connectivity sector. And then, of course, the area of bioscience and medtech, health IT, and of course, with the CDC located in our region, that's, of course, a big driver, and a couple of other institutions that work in this space. And as John mentioned, I mean, we really want to grow those sectors. And John, correct me if I forgot something, but
yeah,
we focus. I think one big, and the reason why we forget sometimes to mention one sector is just because one big component of this region is really the diversity in industry sectors, and that's very beneficial in any kind of economic situation, and especially last year that we have really this diversity in industry sectors. So. Yeah, I think that is kind of an overview. Did I forget one, John?
Yeah, you got the sectors right. I think you mentioned esports and digital media and filming, of course, is a big one, and film, fintech, cybersecurity. I would add on a general level, you answered Bill's question on the ecosystem perfectly. On a general level, is again, our board is made up of the top executives of major companies here. For companies coming in, and much of your audience, Bill, perhaps in soft land, is those SMEs looking for a soft landing. On a general level, it's a corporate hub here in Atlanta. So it's a hub of Fortune 500 headquarters, Fortune 1000 headquarters. These are the largest publicly traded companies in the U.S. And to be honest, they don't have a specialty. They are, if you look at our Fortune 500 headquarters, our Fortune 1000 headquarters, it runs the gamut of industry sectors, which we believe is a good thing. The underlying story is good in general for business, but these are major, oftentimes multinational companies. Some are household names like Delta and Home Depot and Coca-Cola, put in a plug for the hometown. And others are again, large multinational companies, but they run the gamut. But the other thing that's along that line is that Atlanta is also a hub for Inc. 5000 companies. Now, the Inc. 5000 are the fastest growing privately held companies. So you have a combination of the large publicly traded companies, the legacy companies, if you will, and yet also a concentration of the fastest growing private companies, which not only run the gamut in ecosystems, as Michael was explaining, but also in size. I mean, fastest growing is a matter of percentage. So to have that combination of giant legacy companies and fast-growing private companies is really an unusual thing to find. Not many U.S. cities really are in the top level of both of those. And for companies coming in, international coming in for that soft landing, that provides, again, a very solid, varied foundation of resources. If it's that first category I mentioned, they already have customers or clients, it might very well be one of those Fortune 500 companies. It might very well be a Coca-Cola or a Home Depot that's driving that. But on the other hand, they also have this foundation rather of Inc. 5000, these fast-growing private companies. So many of them are, getting up on their legs and running forward. And so again, it's a unique combination of legacy giant companies that could be driving it, but also a foundation of fast-growing private companies that they're all there kind of running together. So and that's regardless of the ecosystem. You throw in the ecosystem specialty, and then that goes even further. Some of those Inc. 5000s are in those ecosystems. OneTrust, for example, is actually the #1 company now on the Inc. 5000. So the fastest growing privately held company in the US is an Atlanta company called OneTrust, which is in the cybersecurity field that Michael was mentioning. So where you have all those coming together, then of course it becomes a home run for those companies coming in.
That's great, and actually a really good segue to talk about the trade side of your work. Obviously the strong ecosystem there has created a base of companies that are selling outside the U.S. and are going and opening up operations and also exporting all around the world. And maybe we could shift to talk a little bit about your work in terms of helping the Atlanta region companies go abroad. What are some of the things that you do in terms of supporting the trade side of your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great topic, actually very timely, because this week Georgia was ranked among the top 10 states in exporting states in 2020, which I think speaks really for that resilience last year of a lot of Georgia businesses, a lot of them small, medium-sized businesses. So that's of course great news. It's for the whole state of Georgia. We work really closely with the state of Georgia, and as I mentioned at the beginning, also with the U.S. Commercial Service and a lot of regional partners, the District Export Council, the Small Business Development Center. So really to build this whole trade ecosystem. So we want to make sure that all of us talking to each other, that when a company reaches out to one of us, they can get access to everyone. And usually, I mean, we do a lot of different things when it comes to trade, but I usually try to sum them up in the 3 words: educate, activate, and connect. Those are kind of the keywords I use for that. On the education side, it's really about educating companies about the benefits of exporting. Some companies understand the benefits. Some companies don't really want to take the risk of exporting. And I mean, as John mentioned, we have a big consumer base in the United States. A lot of companies focus on the US market. And then there are others that either proactively want to grow their customer base, or they get someone reaches out to them for their products or services from abroad, and they just react to it. And so we want to make sure that the companies know about the benefits that come with exporting, but also knowing about the resources that are out there that they can use. And not every company is aware of all the resources that are there, that are often free and or very inexpensive from all different kind of actors here. And on the activation side, this is actually something we have done for the last 5 years now. It's a program that's called the Atlanta Metro Export Challenge, which is a large grant program that we've been operating for years with our partners again. And this is really every year companies in the region can apply for grants and mentorship through that program. So every year we work with a cohort of companies and they have access to a reimbursable grant that they can use to, in a normal year, travel or to a trade show or visit with customers. But in time like this, using it especially to build out their export business in general, which means they could globalize their website, they can do market research with it, they can spend it on paperwork that they have to do, or insurance, things like everything that can help them build their international sales. And so in that year, they get that grant. They also get access to a mentorship group, people, trade specialists that work with the company throughout the years. And so we have successfully run that with our partners since 2016. It originally came out of a collaboration between the brokerage institution JP Morgan Chase. So JP Morgan Chase was one of the founding fathers of this whole program. And we're still running that. And so we're going into the 5th cohort this year, actually, from the 2021 cohort relatively soon. And the last piece really is the connection piece. And John talked about it at the beginning already, but we want to make sure that the companies know about resources here in the region, but also the resources we have in other markets. Because as you mentioned, we are generalists when it comes to sectors, also with regard to countries. So of course, we are not expert in every country a company wants to export to. So we rely a lot on our partners here in the market, but also abroad to connect companies to the right resources, similar to what we do when a company comes to the United States. And so the great thing is that, for example, the state of Georgia has offices around the world in 12 different markets. The federal government, of course, with the U.S. Commercial Service, has offices around the world. So we want to make sure the companies are connected to them. And then the last thing I want to mention in that context is we, of course, work a lot with the private sector too. And that can be partners like Softland Partners, for example. These kind of networks are very crucial for us because we know people that work in that same ecosystem, on the same world that we do, just in a different market, and we can send companies over there and they can get assistance. I think that's probably summing it up. We do a lot of different things, as I mentioned, but I always try to kind of structure it a little bit.
Yeah, and it seems like between your work in on the attraction FDI side and the trade side, you must have a fairly significant needs assessment that happens up front. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how does the process start with a company that you're working with? How do you find out? As you mentioned, John, I think you said that there's a real variety of or variance in terms of what one company needs or wants versus what another company needs or wants. What do you do an upfront needs assessment to evaluate that?
For the inbound or the outbound?
Either way, I would imagine you probably have to ask some questions.
Well, actually, there's some similarities between both, and I'm sure Michael can chime in. I mean, a lot of it is they don't know what they sound silly. They don't know what they don't know.
Sure.
And so many times a company, certainly for coming in, and I'll let Michael chime in on the going outside, but for coming in, as I said, they have that better mousetrap they want to bring into the market, or they have those customers already here, but they've been servicing them from their home country. It's an entirely different kettle of fish to actually set up in the U.S. and to do the business in the U.S. And so so a lot of what Michael and I will do, again, with our partners, is to help them through that process, and frankly, go through things that they may not be aware of, that they may not have thought about because they're concentrated on that better mousetrap, or they're concentrated on keeping their client happy. So in setting up the U.S., obviously there are issues of incorporating in the U.S., structuring that way, and which is principally a tax issue initially. How one sets up that corporate structure. We don't do that. We're not lawyers or accountants, but certainly we again connect with folks and discuss it in general terms. And also, frankly, letting companies know it's not a difficult process, frankly. Setting up a U.S. entity is in and of itself not a very complex process. It's fairly easy, certainly here in the state of Georgia. It's fairly easy, not very expensive. And then having that set up, so when that business does really start generating significant revenue, U.S. generated revenue. So you have that customer base already, perhaps in the first category, or you built that better mousetrap and you start selling that better mousetrap to U.S. customers. You want to have that U.S. entity in place to handle the U.S. side of your business. Again, not a difficult process, but it's something to have in place. Companies need kind of to be walked through that process sometimes. And then it's a matter of, if that better mousetrap requires logistics, supply chain issues, how does that go through? Again, the U.S. is in almost every circumstance, unless maybe we're dealing with China or Russia, is a larger country physically than almost any country coming into here, or Canada perhaps. So how do you get those products, that better mousetrap out to your potential customers? It's a logistics question that is often fundamentally different from what they're used to in their mother country. U.S. insurance issues are different. We have a reputation of being a litigious society, somewhat justified, but somewhat overblown. Many of that can be addressed up front with appropriate insurance, but insurance in the U.S. is largely different from insurance, even if they have that in their mother country. So again, these are issues that, and to your question of needs assessment, we sort of go through and have they considered these issues going on through. Even something that may be very fundamental and basic for a U.S. citizen, such as opening a bank account or getting a driver's license or social security number or tax ID number, can be a hurdle for an international company coming in. So we walk through that. A lot of that narrative, though, is it's really not that complex. I mean, we try to provide those connections, those resources, that direction. Our consulting services, our ecosystem specialists, our project management team, all of that is gratis and confidential. So we're here to be a resource for those companies going through. But those are, again, things that they may not have thought about coming into the U.S. We want to put those issues in front of them, but at the same time, let them know that, it's not that giant hurdle that you need to address it, but it's not really a showstopper. You can do it, and with the appropriate resources and appropriate direction, you can get through and then get onto your business at hand of that better mousetrap or servicing that customer you already have.
Sure. No, that's good to understand. So, Michael, maybe I could switch to you and let's talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that you see companies make in either direction. But what are some of the challenges that you see that are maybe most either prevalent or maybe important that companies are challenged by in terms of either internationalizing from the U.S. or entering the U.S.?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will again probably split it up into the inbound and outbound side, because I think it's very different what kind of mistakes are involved in that. And for the outbound side, it's difficult. I don't think there's like a list of mistakes that are very common. I think really varies on where the company stands in their process. Like, have they exported before? Are they new to exporting? And what kind of size the company is in, which markets they focus on. So there are different things that play a role there. But I think the underlying mistake that I've seen with companies is probably not accessing the resources that are out there, like especially the free resources that are out there. A lot of companies are either not aware of it, so that's why we do a lot of education around making companies aware of it, but also not using them and doing things by themselves, which is fine for some company that works really well. But of course, there's always a risk associated with exporting, and we want to be honest about that. There are challenges, of course, involved. Every country is different. Every industry sector is different regulations. And so what I always recommend to companies is to really go out and using the resources that are there, people that have worked in this field for a very long time and can really help on these kind of initial steps. And then I think that is really connected to a second mistake, is kind of underestimating the investment you have to make when it comes to exporting. And I'm not just talking about financial investment, I talk about time commitment too. And so what I really often recommend companies to do is picking someone on the team, having someone in place that is kind of focused on that international expansion, someone that is kind of the go-to person that goes through the whole process, that worked with any partner in the respective state they're in or the different region, and really work on market research and working on understanding kind of the requirements per market. And I think then you can avoid a lot of the mistakes that companies make when they expand into another market.
And that's true both ways. That having that person really to manage the process, whether it's the inbound side or the outbound side. Absolutely right.
Yeah, I think that's probably sums it up really well. But again, it really depends really on the markets and sectors that you are in. And there are different requirements for different markets. And, they're experts in each market really often. And it's very different if I work with a company that has a very straightforward exporting process, like they have a physical product, they put in a box and they ship it out, and there are certain requirements, different documentations you have to focus on. And it's different for a company that sells the technology. And as John said, we are generalists when it comes to industry sectors, but we are also generalists when it comes to what kind of companies we work with when it comes to exporting. Could be technology, it could be a service, it could be a product. And for each of those different categories, of course, there are different requirements, whether it becomes to whether it's about data privacy or whether it's about shipping requirements or documents they need at the port and things like this. So we try to navigate that. And it probably goes a little bit back to the question you asked earlier about kind of how do we do the need assessment. And we hear about those companies from different sources, whether they reach out directly to us, whether they reach out to one of our partners, whether they meet them at the event, or if they require any export certification, reach out through that channel. We kind of try to figure out how can we best help them. Are we the ones that can provide a good resource, or someone at the U.S. Commercial Service or the state may be better equipped to provide that particular information? And we kind of know who is an expert in which field, an expert in what field. And so then we can make that introduction and make sure the company gets the access to the right information as quickly as possible.
That's great. So one of the things that I heard you say, Michael, and maybe John, you could chime in on this, was it about companies, in some cases, not either knowing the resources that are available or not accessing the resources. And I'd love your thoughts on something, John, and that is what role do you see? It's something that's always curious for me. What role do you see ego playing in how a company succeeds or fails at expanding internationally?
Why did you flip that question to me?
Yes, because I knew you could handle it.
Michael is so humble, so he well, no, it's I would say that the ego there, I'll tiptoe kind of a little bit around that. I would say that regardless of ego or regardless of that, I mean, any sort of site location decision should be data driven. Let's put it that way. And so just like the company would in its home country, I mean, if it's a Mittelstand in Germany or a PME in France or an SME anywhere, they built up their business. They're obviously very good at their business. Clearly, it's been a methodical business decision in doing that. And there may be some ego or some hubris if you've really done very well. But building up your business is a data-driven process, no matter what the company is, and data on all sorts, whether it's the data of the productivity of the mousetrap you're making, the widget you're making, or the data in the spreadsheets and managing the cash flow. And it's a data-driven, objective exercise in growing that business. The site location process should be no different. And so whether it's ego or preconceived notions, some sort of non-business foundation, non-data driven, why would a company make its U.S. market entry decision or location decision on not using data, not using business principles that are important to their business? So to kind of twist around your thing there, we see a lot of companies. If it's a tech company, for example, they may go to locations which are known tech locations, and again, ecosystems are important. They might go to known tech locations in the U.S., say, but some of these can be very expensive locations. We suggest looking at data that's out there, looking at economic indicators, looking at the whole picture of the data. Where are those ecosystems in place? What is the cost going to be that? What are those, Michael mentioned the investment, both for outbound and inbound that's required. What is that investment going to be? What are those operating expenses going to be? What is the burn rate of that company that's coming into the US. Unless it's got that customer already lined up that we mentioned, it's probably going to be going through not making a lot of money the first few years, which is fine. That's how you build the business. But what is that burn rate going to be? And it can be more severe in some locations than in others. This is a data question. And so we always encourage companies to look at the data that's relevant to them. And again, that could be any range of economic indicators, cost of living index, tax index. It could be mechanical issues or functional issues like logistics, getting back to the mother country, getting to your customer base. Is it by plane or by train or by truck? These are all data-based decisions that should go into that location decision process. And then, at the end of the day, there could be some subjectivity. You got both things that are equal, and then you might like one over another. But a site location decision should not necessarily be where a company had its best family vacation in the U.S. Or what they see on TV, on U.S. television. That's in I call sometimes the CSI effect of certain. Back when CSI was a big series, but it has certain U.S. locations, and that that's all well and good on a TV show, but that is not germane to the business at hand. So we always encourage a data-based decision, just as that company is doing to grow itself in its home country. Should be the same principle in that U.S. Market expansion. And so that would be my sort of turnaround experience to that.
Sure. No, I think ego is always an interesting thing, because we wouldn't get out of bed, we wouldn't have the motivation to cross an ocean to enter another market if it weren't for ego. On the other hand, at least our experience has been on the kind of the marketing side and the revenue generation side.
I would add though, I mean, if they're looking to come in, it's two different things actually. If they're looking to come to the U.S., I guess ego you're calling out called entrepreneurialism or getting there. I mean, if they're looking to expand to the U.S., if we're on the U.S. market entry side, they've already reached that point. You're right. I guess ego might be the word for it, or entrepreneur or expansion. They say, hey, we have built that better mousetrap, or we have those customers. We want to expand and make our footprint in the U.S., make our name in the U.S. Or it could be a matter sometimes of their home country is only so big. You take, for example, a Nordic country, the country of Sweden, let's just use that for an example, beautiful country. We have a lot of Swedish companies here, do a lot of work there. This country of Sweden, the population is about the same as the population of the state of Georgia. So if you've got a Swedish company and they're expanding in their home market, you can only expand so much. And so if they've got that better mousetrap or something, they want, again, go to that largest thing. That might be ego driven. It might just be a matter of functionality. They want to do that. But again, but then conversely on the outbound side, and Michael can speak to this, many times on the outbound side, as Michael said, counseling, we're encouraging our companies to go overseas. We're saying, hey, look, 95% of the world's market is outside of the US. So for the outbound side, and Michael can speak to some of this, a lot of what we do is really encouraging them, maybe, try to build up their ego, but say, hey, look at this market out there and look at this opportunity. And Michael, you do a lot of that. So, it's different on either side there, right?
Yeah, and it really goes back to some of the early comments I made on the education side. It's, companies start for different reasons. Some companies get a request from a foreign market and they just think they react to it. And then the other ones that really proactively go out and want to export. But then there are a lot of companies that are just satisfied having a good customer base here, and they don't necessarily want to take that risk of exporting. And we kind of try to help them on that initial kind of step. And
push them out of the nest.
And so, yeah, and again, like John said, it's data driven too. Like you do your market research before you get on the plane and fly somewhere. And I mean, you might go to a conference that might be helping you to see kind of what the interest in your products and services are. But you also do your market research and you focus on the markets. There's a demand for your product and service and technology, and you maybe focus on one or two at the beginning, and then after a while you add more to it, instead of focusing on too many at the same time. So I think again, it's really focusing on where's the demand. And we try to get them to that point, and then afterwards to really help them to really enter that market.
Sure.
Where's the demand? But again, those different factors that are there, the operating expenses, the cost of living, the business, the logistics, is the customer base there? Can you get to it? It's a range of different factors, but they can be quantified. And so it's a matter of really seeing what's there and capturing that data and making it relevant to what you need to do.
Sure.
Either way, frankly, either way, in
Sure.
down or out.
I guess what I'm hearing is that the most valuable skill is in the process. Certainly, you've talked about network, but also the skill of listening, and that may be observation. Obviously, a lot of different ways to listen, but to listen to the data. My reference to ego was more about those that come in that tend to not listen. And there are a variety of parties that they might not listen to, right? They might not listen to, any data or kind of select. And I guess I was really referencing that challenge that, again, if you don't have some ego, you won't get up out of bed. But on the other hand, so much, and you stop listening to customers, you stop listening to employees, you stop listening to the market, and so in any event, it's always an interesting thing because we tend to focus on quite often very hard skills, and sometimes it seems the soft ones that can really hurt us the most. We've got just a moment maybe if you want to share what if somebody wanted to activate a relationship with you all. Obviously, we'll put your contact info in the description down below. But what's the best way to get a relationship started or to investigate working with the Metro Atlanta Chamber?
Well, we certainly appreciate, put the contact info in. We're happy to do that. MetroAtlantaChamber.com is our website. I'm sure you would include that in Michael's and my emails. Just reach out to us. We're fine. Or reach out to you, Bill. You know how to reach us. And we're happy to do that. I mentioned earlier, many of these, we call them consulting services. Many of these resources we provide are gratis. They're confidential. We'll do things that are, we do our best anyway to be relevant for the company at hand. And that goes back almost to your initial question about the ecosystems. If it's not a good fit in Atlanta, we're not going to try to push that, but we might. I use the oil and gas industry as an example. Atlanta is not an oil and gas hub. There are oil and gas hubs in the U.S. We happen to know people there. We're happy to make appropriate connections if that's, say, a sector of theirs. But on the other hand, we are hubs in a host of other ones: logistics, fintech, health IT, some that I've mentioned. And we're happy to make connections in that regard. So we're really here to be a resource for companies coming in. If we're not able to address a question, given Michael's and my collective experience, given our team's experience, given our board of directors and the business resources we have, we probably know people who can. So we're here to be a resource, and I would mention that. And Michael can comment on the side for the local side, what we can do for them.
You mean like here, someone reaching out? Same thing. It's like we want to function as a resource. Sometimes we can help, and sometimes we know someone who does, who can help them. And then, of course, having networks like the Softland Partner Network, having networks of commercial service officers in state around the world, we can maybe make introductions there. So it's really about the reaching out, and we make sure that you get to the right place and the right contact.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you both taking the time today and really helping our audience see some of the opportunities, both in terms of being successful as they internationalize, but also in a nice visit to the Atlanta region as well.
We welcome that, certainly.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully your weather warms up down there soon. It's your weather's like ours right now.
We're a little bit warmer, I think, but at least we're not under under a huge winter thing like much of the U.S. right now. So come on in, sunny South.
Well, it was so good to see you today. Thank you for spending the time.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
One-way ticket across the